Hello, my name's Barry. Welcome to Christianity Explained. Today, we're going to review a video that was recently put out by Dr. Jordan Cooper, who is a confessional Lutheran. Uh, if I understand correctly, and he'll introduce himself at the beginning of this video. He's a professor at some seminary, and he provided some very interesting insight in the video about the idealization of a parish or any church that we get from the internet as opposed to the real world. I'm going to share my own insight. Uh, even though I've only been dealing with the Lutheran church for like a year and that, I do have plenty of other experiences that can say, let's talk. So let me switch over. What the heck? Okay, you want to play that game? All right. Here we go. Just so you know, I did speed up the video just a little bit to speed things along. It's only a 15-minute video in normal length.
If you don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Jordan Cooper. I am the executive director of an organization called Just and Sinner, and I also am.
And yes, I do have closed caption, so you can follow along a little more easily.
Chair of Lutheran Dogmatics at American Lutheran Theological Seminary. If you want to check out our organization, you go to justandsinner.org. If you want to find information about the seminary that I work for, you can go to alts.edu. And I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers this year. I'm getting close, so please help me out. Subscribe, share this video, share the other things with your friends. If you've watched and don't subscribe, make sure that you do so I can hit that number soon. Now, on today's video, I want to address an issue that has really been pressing upon me recently, something that I have been thinking about quite a bit. And this is the relation between what we view on the internet and the kind of aesthetics that we find on the internet relative to various ecclesial traditions and our own actual in-person experience going to visit congregations within each of those traditions. And there is a lot of talk online about what is the true church, what is the right church. And when people are looking at which church they desire to be a part of, that process of examining different traditions and claims of the various traditions does often begin with the internet. And there is something that is unfortunate about the fact that a lot of the
Yeah, it is true. A lot of our assumption how a church function is shaped by what we see on the internet, and a lot of time it is idealized, and we imagine like, wow, if I could just go. Here's a great example in my neck of the woods, so I should say denominational background. I'm sure you've heard of Philip Anthony Mitchell. From everything I've heard, he supposedly preached the gospel, uh, a, a man of the word of God, all that great stuff. And his church is booming. So it's very easy to get an idealized expectation like, oh, yes. And yes, I can also warn, I'm not even going to bother with Philip Anthony Mitchell. In my old church, there was a guy who idealized in his mind, in his own imagination, like, oh, so somebody to preach like the great Bill Johnson or Stephen Furtick and everything. And I'm like, I actually, even though I really was about the pastor at the time, I actually was feeling sorry for him because what this guy was saying, not Cooper, but the person I was talking to some years back, I actually felt sorry for the pastor because there's no way he's going to measure up. And it's like an unfair comparison to somebody who's deemed a celebrity in that. And this is true. Like if I get a local a local confessional Lutheran church down the street from me, I don't have one. I have it's an ECLA, different one. Guess what? Even then, I have no business expecting that pastor who churches up the street from me to preach and teach like Chris Roseborough, who has a great church online that I connect with. No, it would be unfair and unjust. Plain as that. Even if that person was confessional Lutheran, what have you, same theology and everything else. Not because guess what? He is not Chris. Chris is not him. And that's kind of the thing Jordan is talking about here.
That research does begin on the internet. Now, I want to say I'm thankful people are using the internet because, well, that's what I do.
Yeah.
And, that's.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, my dear Jordan. And I have a channel where I try to share insight to commentary, and I hope if you're liking what I'm doing, please hit the like. I'd love it if you subscribe. And by the way, I have gotten some good insight off of Jordan Cooper, and he does have a lot of great insight. So you can go to his YouTube channel, which is Just and Center. You can see it right here on the bottom, which has his his channel, and you get some good insight on his as well.
Part of how I make my living is through the things I do on the internet. So there are blessings about the internet, but there are.
He's also a writer. He has a lot of books and stuff that he's written. I've came across a couple, but I never got back to reading them. Sorry, Jordan. It's not you, it's me.
So negatives about looking at these things on the internet as well. So the accessibility of information is good, but the internet presents, and this is just inherent to the platform, it presents church traditions in their ideal form, not in their actual form. You know, it's kind of like when people used to use Instagram for actually posting personal photos before it just became another version of TikTok, that when people posted photos on Instagram, what you'd see on Instagram was an idealized version of their life, right? They're not gonna take pictures of their worst day. They're not gonna take pictures of all the negative things happening in their life. You know, popularly you see these couples that have terrible relationships, but when you look on social media, it looks like they're very happy. And so you get this idealized form of what reality is on the internet. You got that on Instagram, but I think you see the same thing with churches. Now, I say this because I have encountered a situation a lot more recently where I talked to someone who has looked into a tradition. Say they look into the Lutheran tradition.
Okay. I want to pause for a sec because he does bring up a point. Some time ago, I was watching a YouTuber who was trying to make a comment about what he thought was going on in Pentecostal charismatic churches. Except he was showing the big megachurch setup. I'm watching these things and I'm going, I hate to break it to you, bro, but I was going to a storefront church. We don't have that. I'm sorry, we don't have rock and roll and smoke machines or whatever the heck that is. No, they don't have the budget. They don't have the ability to do that. It was actually soft rock. I'm sorry, it wasn't like that at all. It was nothing. I have a friend, an apostolic prayer center. I got in there, nothing like this stuff that you're seeing. And that's another point, which that's why I say, yeah, I understand exactly what you're talking about, Jordan, because of that. And I think we have to be careful with broad brushing. I'm glad that there are good discernment ministers who are pointing out, they're talking about the bad teacher, the ones who are creating most of the problem, and people just pick up on it without discernment. Great. But we have to be careful not to broad brush, because you could do the same thing with some of these others. And yes, I will agree it is, but we need to temper it.
most common with people talking to me, because that's where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And they send me an email and they say, I went to my local Lutheran church and it wasn't like what I wanted it to be. And so I think I'm just going to go somewhere else, because they went to their local congregation and they found things that didn't align with this, perfection of this kind of perfect form of what ideal Lutheranism is, because what you're going to get online is that ideal form of what Lutheranism is. And so, if you're on the internet, you're going to see something like the liturgical beauty of like Father Will Wheaton's church. You're going to hear the preaching of someone like Brian Wolfmueller, and you can find all sorts of really deep theological content online. And then if you go to your local confessional Lutheran church,
I think I said that, and yeah, it's the same thing as what Jordan was saying. It would not be right to compare uh, your local Lutheran pastor or Baptist pastor to people who are well-known figures. Like, I actually only recently been finding out about Brian Wolfmueller. He's quite good. I'd like to see his teaching, not just the Q&A. Mhm. Will Wheaton, is that the actor or somebody else? I don't know. I don't know who Will Wheaton is. I just know him. He's an actor on. I think he was the actor on Star Trek Next Generation. That's the Will Wheaton I know. So feel free to put a comment telling me, no! It's somebody else. Feel free to have a little fun with me on that.
you go to that parish and the liturgy isn't perfect. The pastor doesn't always face the right way when he's supposed to. And the pastor, when you go up and ask him after the service about particulars of arguments from Robert Bellarmine that you found on the internet, he may look at you with a blank stare, very confused about how to respond to you. What are you talking about? And maybe the preaching was not ideal. And maybe it was fine, the doctrine was fine, but it wasn't very exciting, it wasn't as in-depth as you'd like it to be. And then you say, well, maybe the Lutheran Church is not for me. Here's the problem. It doesn't matter which tradition you're looking at. Whether it's the Lutheran tradition, whether it's the Eastern Orthodox, whether it's the Roman Catholic or the Anglican. And I'm only pointing out those four traditions because those are the ones that tend to be the most, aesthetically enticing. So this is where I see this.
Yeah, actually, those four have a lot more in common. They are what's called the high church. They're the one that use the liturgical setup with the liturgy and all that. And it's like, wow, they want a great place to get a sense of the reverence, and I think that's what the appeal is. But and keep in mind, he is a committed confessional Lutheran. He's not endorsing anything. It's just that he has to deal with the reality of what he runs into. So please do not send a message saying, you're endorsing this. No.
The most. Maybe it's the case in other traditions as well, but this is at least where I see it more, is that they love the aesthetics of the high church service. They love the idea of the theology and the depth in the history. But when they actually are in their local parish, it is not everything that they really desire it to be. And this leads to, a couple different responses. One response is to say, well, I'm just going to go anyway, which I think is honestly the right response, as I'm going to say. Another response is going to be, well, maybe this tradition isn't it. Maybe I have to find another tradition. Or another response might be, well, I have to find a better church in this tradition, so I'm going to drive an hour away to go to some other church, and then I'm not actually going to be involved in my local community here. And so I see this a lot, especially within Roman Catholic parishes more than anywhere else, where you go to your local parish and it's a Novus Ordo Mass, and then you say, well, I don't want that. I want traditionalist Roman Catholicism. And then you say, okay, well, there's a Latin Mass parish an hour and 20 minutes away, so I'm going to drive there and hang out with all the trads and have the perfection of what it is that I want in the church. Now, I think the irony of this, especially with those looking at Roman Catholicism, is that this is such an American consumeristic view of the church, where you have picked or you've chosen your ideal form of what you think the tradition should be, and you then choose that congregation and neglect the others for that reason. You're like, I want to find the perfect church, so I'm just going to do that.
Ooh. I got to give Jordan credit on that. And I want to pick the time. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he is right. We in America have become very consumer driven. Ooh, do you fit my taste? Are you doing what I want rather than invest the time? As my friend told me when I was getting into confessional Lutheranism and I started doing some digging, yes, I started. Now, my friends here who actually came out of Pentecostal tradition, so they understood that, okay, I'm looking over here, but they wanted to be patient, they were gracious, and helped me to learn all these other wonderful things that are part of the whole thing and learn to get the whole. And I say, thank you guys. You're a blessing. Because, yes, I had an interest. And yes, confessionals are open, but not in the way of what I got indoctrinated with. And that takes time. Same thing with anybody else who comes out of a different tradition and that. And the fact is, a lot of our consumer mentality is shaping how we treat traditions we like and that. I've been to Baptist church and I know full well there are some beauties in there, but I can't go and expect one to be, let's say, my friend John Strain, who used to be the pastor of a local First Baptist Church of Toms River, and expect him to preach like my friend Stephen Gibney, who is an excellent Baptist preacher on his church. Very different people, and each pastor can only bring up what they know. So we have to be a little fair and gracious and kind to them and understand they're human. Okay? Here's another thing. I know Jordan will eventually get to it, but it's important that we remember our pastors are human. They're going to put their foot in their mouths. No matter how hard they try, they will. And sometimes we will put our foot in our mouth. We'll get under their skin. So let's exercise grace with these churches that we go to. All right? And understand that we're still learning. And I agree, that's the other problem. Well, I'm going to wait and I'll elaborate. I'll see what he says.
It's really not functioning on the basis of like ecclesiastical authority. I mean, you're supposed to go to the church that's near you, your parish that is near you. I mean, that's in Roman Catholic teaching at least. And so the idea that you just kind of go to whatever parish happens to align with your sensibilities is precisely the thing that Roman Catholics often critique Protestants for doing, is that you just like, well, I like this church better. I like the way they do things better. So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to do here. And so it becomes a matter of, well, private judgment and subjective preferences. I see.
I feel like I want to interject this thing. As a person with disability and limited in terms of how he can travel and that, and Uber, while I'm thankful for the blessing of that service provide, it costs money, a lot, to travel for me. Where others, they can hop in a car. But even then, I could understand someone not wanting to drive an hour away. So I have to access, do things with online. My only real option is to do a small fellowship group that I can connect with. And let's say I did. Well, I have to be gracious and recognize that, okay, they're not going to preach like quit. Okay, they're not. I can't. So I have to be fair and kind to them, and gracious there too. Yeah. So I can understand the need for these online. They do have a place, but they shouldn't be a substitute for fellowship.
See this often in Eastern Orthodox parishes as well. And this is particularly evident when people are in Eastern Orthodox parishes that are not parishes of converts.
Yeah.
And there is, again, this idealized form of what Eastern Orthodoxy is online. And when people are in a parish, I see far too often, I see this more in Eastern Orthodox churches than anywhere else, which is people go and they have a perception of what it's supposed to be. They love it for the first year. Reality sets in of what the culture at that parish is actually like. And after a few years, they burn out and leave the church entirely. Like, this is a story that I hear over and over again. There was a recent Substack article by someone who was in an Eastern Orthodox parish who wrote about this phenomenon, talked about he's seen friends do this, and I've seen the same thing. And so that's not a critique of Eastern Orthodoxy. This is a critique of the way that people approach church life versus the internet. And this affects everybody.
He's right. We have to be willing to take time to learn. Let's say I had the ability to drive and do things. I can't just keep hopping between churches. Even when I was living out in Phoenix, Arizona, Tempe, where I could do something like that. It takes time to learn about the church culture. When I was in downtown Phoenix, I went to a Black Baptist church, National Baptist Association. It's time to learn the culture. And in time, I started finding out that, there are some problems here. And that it wasn't their theology. It was more of political, social dynamics that were going on that wasn't helpful. All right. I still think kindly of that church, even though I had to go a different way.
And so I think I want to say this. When people are looking at the church on the ground, they cannot and should not expect the perfect instantiation of their tradition in the local parish. And if currently you live somewhere where you have that, like there are these kind of ideal parishes, they're not perfect by any means. They say, don't join a perfect church because if you do, you'll ruin it. There's truth to that, right? So people go to, their local church in these ideal situations. Say you're studying at a university somewhere, and because of the university culture, you have a very intellectually rich parish and congregation. But you may not be there forever, and you can't be in this particular church tradition just because of one parish, because it may not be there somewhere else. It may be a less than perfect parish. It may be something that has practices you don't really love, that doesn't have a community that is that oriented toward outreach maybe you want. There are imperfections absolutely everywhere. And so when you're looking through church traditions or at church traditions, you can't do that in a way where you are placing yourself above all traditions and kind of saying, well, I'm going to judge every congregation as if you are some absolute standard of truth. I mean, this is the ultimate kind of private judgment, but I see this all the time where somebody's like, well, I'm committed to, say, the Lutheran tradition theologically, but, I don't see any parishes near me that use the one-year lectionary, or I don't have any parishes, near me that use, incense on high holy days. And so I might have to look elsewhere, or I'll drive 2 hours away to find a church that does. When you do that, you're placing yourself in this position, like over all of these ecclesial traditions, where you can be like, well, I know what's pure. I haven't even been part of this tradition. Like, I'm not formed in it. I don't know their hymnody. I don't know what the piety is like. I don't know anything. I've just watched a bunch of videos on the internet. And now I can kind of stand above them as judge and look.
I get what you're saying. You really can't know what a church really is like unless you have an opportunity, like to interact with people on a Discord server, or learn through times of actual fellowship and listening. That's helpful, but it's also helpful when you can meet people in person. And I understand there is a difference in that. And yes, I know he's building up to it, but I'll wait till he says it, then I'll chime in to to the memory he's bringing to mind.
Down on the individual congregations in a tradition I'm not a part of, to determine why they're bad and why I'm right in a practice I've never actually engaged in the first place, because I've never been part of one of these parishes. Like, do you see how that is such a bad way, an unhealthy way to look at the church? But I see this all over the place. Yeah. And so what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying that you can't evaluate what parishes are in your area and determine to go to one over another. Okay? But what I am saying is that you need to be ready for the reality of parish life in a way that you are actually willing to submit to your pastor in your tradition. And that you do that in a very serious way. And you say, I'm not going to judge or critique. I'm going to sit and listen and be formed by this tradition. And you really have no right to say anything for quite some time until you have been formed. I will say, don't listen to people that are
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think I'll let in. And he is right. Like right now, I'm taking the time to read and listen um, to the Book of Concord and learn what uh, the Augsburg Confession, all that stuff that's in that book is. So I can learn something more of the culture and actually appreciate what actually is held. So I can know. And my friends have told me for some people it takes years to learn and understand and grasp things. And it's right. You can't. Your identity needs to be shaped by the tradition of what is in the book and by the Word of God. That's what it should be, the Word of God. And yes, and compare what the Book of Concord says to that. And let the Word be your ultimate guide and your understanding. And be free to talk about some of the things you're struggling or areas of disagreement. Those are going to happen, and that's normal. But you can't do that, as he's saying, like, oh, I'm going to watch this, I'm forming opinion. No, it doesn't work that way. Yeah.
are apologists professionally for a tradition that they are still being catechized in and are not actually in. This is a major problem all over the place on the internet. And I'm not just talking about like one specific circumstance. I see this all over. And it's a major issue.
Yep.
These traditions, and I think this is especially strange among the Eastern Orthodox, because you find these Eastern converts that it is all intellectual. Like it's in their head, and everything is just the ideas of Eastern Orthodoxy. And how do you know that? Well, if you can defend the ideas of the tradition propositionally without actually being in that tradition enough to be formed by it, then you're functioning on that basis. Like you're just not functioning on the basis of what is at least acclaimed kind of Eastern spirituality, which is supposed to be very different than that. You're formed in it. You submit to authorities. You have to be formed by it in the worship life of that church. But I don't think that's just true of the East. I think that's true of the church in general. And so we have to be careful when speaking about these things until we're actually formed in and with those various traditions. Now, when I say that,
I don't know if you noticed, I haven't really talked much about my Lutheran experience because I'm learning some of this stuff. And only, I don't know if it was a month or so ago, I told Pastor Chris that I did want to formally become a member. But that came at the time of learning and getting some questions I had that were actually important to me answered. And of course, I was told, we have a 2-year thing with the catechism. We want you to spend time so you can learn which I say, good move, guys. I think, and I happen to agree, it is a good thing to do.
I don't mean to say that you can never speak on anything publicly on the internet when you're wrestling through these issues. It's fine to talk about what you think and what you're wrestling through. It's a very different thing, though, to be an adamant apologist for a tradition in this kind of authoritative way when you have not really been in that tradition enough to be formed by it. Right? We are not just brains and vats. We're not just intellects that absorb theological information. We are embodied creatures that need to be formed by the unique historical life of a given church. And that's not something that's immediate. That's something that takes many years and a long period of time. So don't place yourself over the tradition. If you're actually entering into it, then submit to it and learn. Okay, well, that's enough of my rant here. This is just...
As I was listening to him, I would think during the whole thing, I'm reminded of an old cartoon I watched. Yogi's yes. It had to do with Yogi and his friends on a flying ship, looking for the perfect place to live. But every time they go someplace, it was a mess. So somebody says, what if we cleaned it up? What if we participate in the life? I'm translating it over because that's not what was said. What if we got involved with the church that we're in, tradition we're in? What if we take the time to learn? What if we participate and doing something? What contribute? rather than just sit there and consume. What if we did that instead of pointing the finger at everybody's imperfection? Mhm. Yes. Doesn't mean, like you said, doesn't mean we can't talk about some of the problems. That's good. But let's be wise about it and be open to correction and challenge. That helps us to say, hey, what are you doing? Are you playing what? Mhm, mhm.
An issue that I see all the time. And so I want to say, go into a church and instead of just saying, like, well, asking the question, well, is this the right church? And going there and just kind of picking apart everything that's done and said there. Instead, just like commit to it and just say, I'm actually going to commit to this and this is what I'm just going to do. I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to learn from it, be formed by it, and I'm going to be in this local parish. And it may not be a great parish for whatever reason, but you know what? I'm not great either because I am a sinner. And I am not so exalted on myself to think that that I am above whatever's going on in this church. Like, we're all sinners, we're all fallen people, we're going to mess things up too. So we're going to cause issues in churches too. And what is the church? But it's a place where sinners gather together to hear the word of God proclaimed, receive the sacraments, and be formed by one another. And that forming of one another is not just theological, or it's not just correcting what are practices that might not be perfect. It is instead like actually living life in the midst of other human beings and getting to know them and praying with them and praying for them. And all of the things that just go into normal parish life. We need ordinary parish life. And unfortunately, we have so detached ourselves from parish life because we've made ecclesial traditions just an aesthetic online. But that's not how this works in real life. We need to actually be formed by and in our relationships to one another. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. This is something I've wrestled with a lot, and I'm still wrestling through how all this works. I have to wrestle with it because this is my life, right? The dichotomy of my life is that I say this, but I do a lot on the internet, and there's always the question of what is good on the internet and what's not. What is the internet useful for, and where does it kind of overstep these boundaries? And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on whatever that is. If you haven't subscribed,
Yeah.
the kingdom of God is within you.
Whoa. Sorry about that. Oh, good grief. I actually appreciate what Jordan was doing and some thoughts. I'm thinking, even if I was still in the vineyard, it would have been helpful even then. That's why I appreciate the way Jordan did that. And that's why I brought up the stuff that I knew ahead of time. Because partly I'm not just sharing out of me, so you can say, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, might can do the same thing. And yes, it does take time to learn the culture. It does take time to develop friends. And sometimes it's not easy. And it is true, as the old saying goes, oh, you think you found a perfect church? Well, when you show up, guess what? It ain't going to be perfect. 'Cause no, and yet, what if it's online or not? Yes, people are going to get under each other's skin. Guess what? We're fallen human beings. We are going to put our foot in our mouths, and it's going to happen. That's where we get to learn the art of forgive. This is where we learn grace, humility. It's where you learn and develop those and it takes time. Oh, believe me. Right now, I think this. Well, you should have seen me in 2004 or 5 when I walked into my old church. Man, you can be a little bit gentler. Hey, yeah. Oh boy. So, hey, I want to thank you, folks. I hope this has been good food for thought for you, and it is of value. And I hope you enjoy. So, hope you have a blessed day, and see ya when I see ya.